The truth about friction is in the beginning, friction lights a fire. The only problem with friction is when it lasts too long and it erodes and erodes and erodes and erodes the ground or the building. And so we've got to use friction to our advantage. But if we rehearse the life we want, we imagine, we visualize the life we want, and we start to get aware of what gets in our own way, then when real life happens, we could get back on the horse or pivot back to where we want to be quickly.
Well, welcome to the ACE Show. I'm so glad that you're here. This is where we get to help professionals succeed and thrive, really both personally and professionally. And this is where I get a chance to showcase experts in their field, or what I like to call aces in their field, and leverage that knowledge to support all of you in this community. And so there's a really great quote by a mutual friend of ours, Mr. Jack Canfield. He says, everything you think, say, and do needs to become intentional and aligned with your purpose, your values, and your goals. And this is what my next guest, Margaret, actually has spent the past 13 plus years doing, really focusing on helping individuals, teams, and organizations align their purpose from the inside out. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. And when I met you, I did go by Margot. That
That's
was
right.
my nickname when my kids were small. And then as I became more mature and got to pick, actually, I had a granddaughter and she couldn't say Margaret or Margot. And I had a few good friends who would call me Maj. So Sophia was calling me Grandma Maji. And now I go by Maji all the time. And she's 15, but her brother calls me Gramaji or Gramage, which is really funny.
It is Grandma Maggi. I like a Gramage. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
so
for
I
those of
go
you who
by
don't,
Margaret Graziano or Maji, and then for some old timers that knew me when my kids were little, Margot. And,
yes, that's where
you and I met
I find
when my
myself.
kids were school-aged.
And that's where my kids are now too. But so for those of you who don't know who Margaret is, Margaret Graziano, she's the CEO and founder of Keen Alignment. She lives out in California, Aptos, right, which is south
Aptos,
of
yes.
Aptos. Sorry, Aptos is south of San Jose. Mother, as you said, of three. I think they're all boys, right? Three sons,
They're grown, they're men now, they're
three
grown
men.
men,
Yes,
and
they're
they
still
have
your
kids.
babies. Yes,
Yeah.
my mom, when she was alive, she says, "I don't care how old you're going to be, you're still my baby." Um, I think that's the way it goes. Wall Street Journal and Amazon best-selling author of a book called Ignite Culture.
I have it.
You've got it. There it goes. With me right now.
Ignite Culture, and there's a workbook that goes with it. Ignite Culture is really how to create an emergent culture that instead of fearing the moment or resisting the moment, stands in presence in the moment and can be response agile to whatever is needed moment by moment by moment.
That's great.
And it's about how to create an emergent culture. And there's three pieces to that. It's having a noble cause, having an environment that is cultivated for trust, for humility, and for flow. And then building the architecture or taking away some of the framework so that you can build the kind of framework that people can thrive through. A lot of our processes in today's world are from 30, 40 years ago, before we had agents, before we had AI, before we had so many resources that could help us. So we have to rethink the framework of the organization and how people work together, how people get things done. And we have to also rethink the environment we're cultivating by our behavior, our attitudes, our lack of values, by how much friction we tolerate. And then we have to look at what is our north. What is our North Star up there? Is it just about making money? Making money is like a byproduct. It's like people take jobs for money. People have businesses for money, but once the money starts coming in, it has to be about much more than that, or we'll lose our own engagement as CEOs, and we'll lose our executive team, and we'll lose the people that work there. So Ignite Culture is about how to create an emergent culture, one that can be response agile with the world that we're living in now and what's needed to innovate. Yay,
That's
yay,
great.
yay. There's a
Yeah.
workbook too.
What inspired you to write that book? Maybe even how did you get to where you are? Maybe just start with, since we're already on topic of the book, what inspired you? I mean, I love the reason why, what it's about, but what made you decide, gosh, I got to write
Yeah.
this book?
Yeah, because before I was doing culture work, which is the last 15 years, I was in recruiting for 25 years. Took people out of companies, put people in companies, engaged with people that were thinking about should I stay or should I go? And over those 25 years, I have placed over 10,000 people in full-time, temporary, and part-time jobs. And so I knew firsthand there was a lot of friction in most of these organizations. Good people left that they didn't want to. The amount of downtime and stagnation when a good person left and left the company hanging, like there was nobody in the queue to promote into that job or who could. And so it looked like for recruiters, that is the spearhead of culture. Who are you bringing in? And so when I actually started working with Jack Canfield and some other iconic leaders in the human potential field, I started saying, well, recruiting is honorable and it does help people with their lifestyle and their work style. But what if I could impact culture at the core? So instead of just getting people jobs, giving them environments where they could thrive, where their personal life would be just as rewarding as their work life and vice versa. Because what I was finding is 70% of people's waking hours were working. And even people that were happy in jobs that I placed them felt that work was consuming their life. I think I heard a statistic in our lifetime, we spend 90,000. I actually had somebody
Wow.
on my podcast and that's a lot of hours in our life. So I wanted to impact life and people being able to live in alignment. And I thought the way I could do that is I could do one to many. I could do Jack Canfield workshops for hundreds of people at a time, but I'm not Jack Canfield. I don't have chicken soup for the soul. So how can I get to people? And I thought, well, I know organizations, I know HR, I know recruiting, I know C-suite. I spent 2 decades hanging out with CEOs because I owned my own business and I was involved in Vistage. So 90% of their problems that they talk about in Vistage are culture and people. So it was a good business opportunity. I was the right person to get to do that. And I knew it was the right move because it happened, David, so fluidly
Hmm.
that as soon as I made the declaration that I'm going to focus on culture, I wrote one article. It got picked up in a national publication, and I, like, within days, got an email from a brand new CEO. He'd been there about 8 months, and he said, "Everything you talk about in your article not to do, I've done, and I need help." And so it was working with him and about 100 other people, and I started seeing, my goodness, there's a few things that impact culture. And most of the time, they have to do with the person and the people leading it. So I became successful because of all my strengths. Well, at some point, we outgrow what had us be successful. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I'm currently watching The Diplomat. And her husband, and this is a great, great movie series on Netflix. And her husband is up for the vice president of the United States. And she says, "Listen, Hal, whatever got you here is not the same traits that are going to have you get to the next level. You're cutting people off, you're going behind people's back, all that conniving, like, while it worked for a while, it's not going to work." And what
Yeah.
happens in companies, and including mine, is what had me be so successful in recruiting, like that killer instinct, like Hal does from The Diplomat, was not going to work in running a business. People weren't going to always be putting the ball in the hoop or the ace in the hole. People are going to make mistakes. I had been a top producer for as long as I can remember, so I knew how to do the job like the back of my hand, but new people coming in were struggling. And so I had to get better myself, and then when I started working with all these organizations, these CEOs and these CFOs and these COOs and the vice presidents and senior vice presidents, what I started seeing is the human system of the leadership team had certain behaviors that made them strong and certain behaviors that made them really weak and actually self-sabotage. But they're blind spots. We can't see it, just like this character in The Diplomat. Hal cannot see it until his wife, like, gives him a sock right between the eyes and is like, "Dude, calm down." Well, I'm not the wife that gives you the sock between the eyes, but I am the sword that comes in and cuts through the friction and my team and says, "Listen, here's what's not working." For example, I have a client right now and they have to implement agents, AI agents. They're in a highly labor intensive job. They pay people really, really well. It's in the financial services investment industry. They hire highly qualified white collar intellect workers.
Mhm.
The problem is 50% of their time is processing low level work. And it's the same work done the same way every single month, every single year, every single decade. Now, if you read the book by Daniel Pink, To Sell is Human, and The World is Flat, and all the other innovation books, if something can be automated, it ought to be automated. But like with this client, they're so people minded, they're so culture minded, they're also old school minded, and they're operating like there's, and many of them, a few of them are like, let's innovate. But the few that want to innovate cannot get the ones that are stuck in their ways to let go of the vine and consider what's possible if we automate. If we automate a third of our tasks, instead of being worried about us losing our job, what if we can provide higher level of service to
Mhm.
our clients? And so partially what I do and my company does is we go in and we have a culture blueprint. And it's a very specific set of processes, retreats, 3-day retreats, not unlike Jack Canfield's work, because he was one of my OG teachers.
Mhm.
How do we get people ready? How do we cultivate the human spirit? How do we cultivate the environment so that people are naturally inspired and motivated to unlock their genius? And that they feel secure enough and confident enough that they're not worried to hold on to the past. So as I wrote the book because it was the same story everywhere I went. It was the exact same story everywhere I went. And what was taking these companies 5, 8, 9 years to move something over the finish line, they were cutting that time in half when they greased the wheels of the human system, when they cultivated the environment to liberate the human system, for people to feel like they had autonomy, agency, and authority in how to make things better. That's a long answer to that question.
That's great. Well, I mean, it just made me think of some of the best leaders that I have and that I spent so much time working with, and why I wanted to stay around with is because they're they're masters of culture, and they, people will leave if they don't feel like they're cared for. People don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And I think great leadership, I think it starts in the leadership. I believe culture probably starts with the leadership. You got to start there, and I imagine that's where you put your focus on. It sounded like when you were talking, that's where you go. Let's talk about
Yeah,
leaders
so
because it
yes,
goes.
good. So in the book, in the first third of the book is about the individual reading the book. Who am I as a leader? Whether I'm the CEO or the vice president of HR, or I'm a direct manager or a direct, a nurse at a hospital. Who am I as a leader and how am I impacting culture in my personal life, at home, and at work, and on my way to work? And so
Mhm,
first we deal with the individual. Then we look at the team. And yes, the leadership team or a team of people that are working together to move something forward. So it could be the corporate executive team, or it could be a cohort that is working as a cross-functional team moving. We really look at how that team operates Do they operate in a state of flow? Because as you and I both know, and what Jack taught us, is when you're in a flow state is when you write books. When you're in a flow state is when you win contests. When you're in a flow state is when you invent new products. When you're in a flow state is when you feel joy and fulfillment in your job. You're more creative, you're more innovative. Or are we operating in this sense of friction where we're bringing our worst in our personality out? We're impatient with people. We're demanding people be away, do things, but we don't give them the training to do it. Or we're insecure.
Hmm.
We believe the world is moving faster. And so if I have a behavior and you have a behavior and Mary and Jonah have a behavior, all of a sudden the four of us as a team, we seep out the good, and what sticks is the friction. And then we just learn to live with it. And so you have to work with teams, and then you could take it to the streets. You could take it to the organization and get critical mass. But the only way you can take an emergent culture to the streets or boots on the floor or get critical mass is you've got to give people who are natural leaders an opportunity to lead a change project. So you
Hmm.
build a cohort, you build a group of people who have influence in the organization, have an audience, and you let them work on something that's game changing, and you you link them with other people who have different strengths, and then you coach them and develop them and give them the tools for who they need to be as a high performance team to move this initiative forward. I think you move it way faster when you do cross functional cohorts than when you do, we're going to do all of finance and we're going to do all of, IT, and then we're going to do, because they move at their own pace. But when you can work on finance, but now let's work with finance and a cross-functional team. And
Hmm.
so it always begins, it's an inside job. Transformation, emergence, knowledge, self-awareness, self-responsibility, response agility. It's an inside job. Then
Yep.
you could take it to the team. Then you could take it to the whole.
Okay, so you just used the phrase response agility, and I know that's something that you use in your business model. Since you brought it up now, can we talk a little bit about what that means? I'd love to hear a little bit
Yeah,
more
yeah.
because you've got a
So
pod, or you had a podcast. You have a podcast, I
I
think,
do have
called,
a podcast.
yeah, Response Agility Podcast. I
Yeah.
think that's so creative.
Yeah. So it's about moving friction to flow. So about 3 years ago, I took a class with the Flow Research Collective, and I've always been, a Tony Robbins fan. I've always been a peak performer. I was a peak performer and believe I still am the majority of my career, but I didn't really understand how I was a peak performer until I became wiser, older, more mature, and I started doing the research on it. When I was in the Flow Research Collective in their training, everything that they said to do to be in a flow state was a natural habit for me. I did learn new things. I learned how to teach people to get into flow, but I also started seeing the linkage between TR, Tony Robbins's peak performance, the work we did with Jack Canfield, have a vision for your life, have values, know when you're putting on the brakes, know when you need to put on the gas, give love, all the things that we learned way back when. And so I developed a 6-step process called Sculpt. And Sculpt, when you practice Sculpt, when you master Sculpt, you can master being response agile. Standing in the moment, being in the moment, and doing the right thing at the right time because you're present. But the truth is, most people are not present. Most people are either living in the future, what they want, what they need, what they hope to get, or they're living in the past, what they had, how they felt, or the refusal of either one of those. I don't want the past, I don't want the future, but they're not in the present. And I think the statistics right now through the neuroscience research that David Hawkins did, 85% of the time people are not in the present. Well, response agility, mastering that teaches you to be in the present. When volatility, uncertainty, chaos, complexity, confusion are spinning a person out, they learn to stop, whatever that looks like for them, connect to their highest and best self, to understand what's going on inside their body, and then what's going on in the field, around them, and then to ask themselves what's needed now. First, ask me, then ask me of what's needed in the environment, and then listen to the the good word that comes from within, from our internal compass, from our internal guidance system, from our highest level of intellect, which is our gut when it's tuned in to the head, the heart, and the gut. When we're tuned in, that's why I named the company Keen Alignment, because when we're tuned in and we're turned on, then we can be tapped into what's going on in the field and what's needed. And so after you stop, you connect, you understand, you listen, you do a quick process, astuteness, connect the dots, and then and only then you take action. Now, in the beginning, sculpt might take you 2 days. I don't know how to stop. I have to get myself off the ledge. Connect to what? I don't have anything to connect to. Understand what? I don't know what's going on. And I don't have any relationship somatically with my body. So if I'm feeling something inside, I don't even take time to feel it. I just look at what's all the chaos and I get swept up by the chaos.
You
And then
can't L
listen.
listen.
That's right. That's right. And so in order to listen, you have to be present. And then in order to connect the dots, you have to have situational awareness and systems judgment. And then you take action. But what most people do is they get triggered and they take action. It's a split second. It actually only takes a nanosecond for our amygdala. This is this almond shaped little organ in between our ear and back behind our prefrontal cortex. It only takes a nanosecond for a trigger to turn into an action or angry words. There's a good book you might want to read when you're doing your children's books. It's called Andrew's Angry Words, and it's powerful. Remember how Jack Canfield had us every morning we would get there and we would just silently hug everybody? And you saw the energy. Jack always understood energy. And you saw the energy expand, and we got so close, like 100 or 200 of us got so close. Well, what Andrew's angry words are about is Andrew's sister yells at him in the morning, and he takes that energy in his field and he brings it to school, and he yells at someone else and someone else and someone else and someone else. And pretty soon there's all this fighting on the playground. And that's no different than it is in the world of business. When we have energy that is constrained, that is friction, we bring that to work, we keep it at work, it keeps alive and it stops progress. It keeps people feeling safe and they can't really innovate or even have confidence in innovating. So really, response agility is the through line for how do we set ourselves up? What do we need to do to train ourselves so that we can anticipate the moment, we're ready for the moment, we can be in the moment, and we're not caught by the moment. We're ready. We're on the ready.
And that sculpt you talk about, right? Stop, connect, understand, listen, be present,
Process.
process, and
But
then
it's
take
also
action.
presence. You need to be present in order to process.
Yeah. If you're able to kind of follow that framework or methodology, you'll be in a flow, right? Because you say from friction to flow. And I wrote down, and I wonder if there's a little more clarity on this that you could share, but I said, how do you help someone get to flow? And it sounds like maybe the sculpt is one of the ways.
Well, but here's the interesting thing. The only reason I could develop sculpt is all the work I did in the past around being present. All the work I did in the past about opening up my heart. All the work I did in the past about being aware and awake to my impact. You know, back when I first started all this, if you would have said, "What impact do you have?" I'd be like, "I don't have any impact on, I just impact myself." But now I know better. And so when we teach people response agility, we begin by working with them to create an ultimate intention or a purpose for why they're leading. And it's beyond money. It's the North Star. Some people call it intent, some people call it purpose, some people call it like aim. But like even in yoga teacher training, we couldn't even start that certification until they said, "What's your aim?" And like, "Where are you headed for?" And even a good yoga teacher, when you go to the class now, they'll say, "What's your intention for the class?" So why not have an intention for a living? Why not live intentionally? Or as I like to say, inventively? And
I love
so
that.
all of these seeds have to be planted in every piece of sculpt, even the stopping. You have to learn to regulate your nervous system in order to even know when you need to stop. Otherwise, your autonomic nervous system is on overdrive because your sympathetic nervous system has been triggered by your amygdala to tell you you're under attack. And so you're spinning out, your brain is doing the snow globe. You
Uh,
can't see anything. It's just dusty, but around you in your body is turmoil. It's like a hurricane or we're going to have some tidal king tides this weekend. And so it's like a king tide taking over yourself. So you can't even do the stop piece unless you really learn to self regulate. And so I learned about self regulation through heart math. I learned about self regulation through Joe Dispenza. I learned about self-regulation through the Landmark Forum, through Jack Canfield. And I'm sure you remember, but do you remember we're meditating one day? I'll never forget this. And everybody's quiet. You could hear a church mouse, and all of us were kind of new to this world. He was teaching us meditation. This was 20 years ago. I'm in my first class, I think. And all of a sudden, somebody's cell phone went off. Apple bottom jeans in the blue checker. Do you remember that?
uh,
And the whole room looking at her. And Jack didn't flinch. He didn't flinch. The person whose phone went off
it's like,
totally had, yeah, but
yeah,
Jack did not flinch. He didn't laugh. He stayed in his meditation. That's self-regulation.
yeah, that's great. I don't recall that moment, but I could recall probably, I can imagine what my reaction was at. I'd be like, I'm probably dancing to it. So I'm not looking at it as a negative thing. I'm like, this is great. Yeah, oh, I must have needed that, right? And so a lot of what you're talking about, I mean, yeah, sure, you certainly help companies, organizations, teams, but it's so personal. This is like what you're talking about is something for it's this is what I love about the A show. I was like, I wanted to let's talk professional, but let's also talk about personal. This is about helping develop that person. And when you get yourself right, it becomes it helps it become right for other people. Like when you show
That's
up,
right.
this is why such great leaders, the leaders I was talking about earlier, they show up with such a good heart, such good intention. They they may not have ever been through some idea of the sculpt, but they're living the sculpt world.
That's right.
And they just show up. That affects how I show up. And then, oh gosh, I think about my family. How do I show up for my family? So I can imagine this stuff is not only impactful from a professional standpoint, but I imagine even more. I remember even more for personal because I remember when I would coach professionals on, they would come to me for sales advice and I would be, let's figure out your sales goals. And about maybe sometimes sooner, but let's just say about 3 months into the coaching, I'm not talking sales anymore. I'm talking about attitude. I'm talking about what are their vision? Who do they want to be? The side projects that they love. So this just made me go off maybe on a tangent, but I think it's really relevant is what you're doing and what you do with keen alignment and responsibility, all of this wonderful stuff you're talking about, margaretgraziano.com, all this good stuff, right? Is help professionals, sure, be great professionals. However, you're helping them become better people, better
Yeah,
leaders,
well, it's about living in
individuals.
alignment, David, because you see, most people want, I have something I'm going to be releasing soon because we have a Ignite Power retreat for women in January. And I made a video and I said, when we were little kids, we didn't wake up and say, I want to be unhappy. I want to be miserable in my job. I want to be stressed out. No, we had dreams and we had goals and we were so young, we thought we could do anything. And then life happened. And over time, the David gets covered up by dust and rock and everything else. And then someone like Da Vinci or our own Da Vinci has to start getting rid of everything that's not the David. And that's the work. And you got to that with these people because you were tapping into their intrinsic motivation. And when I know what my client's ultimate aim in life is, then I can support them in being the leader they want to be. Because a lot of times people are split, they're two headed. they've got like, I've got my family life and my church life, and then I've got this work and I have to do these things, and they're under pressure and they don't know how to manage their pressure. And so it sometimes stress gets the best of them. And the sculpt process and emergent culture, it's about why don't we take all that stress and all that combustion and turn it into something positive? Because the truth about friction is in the beginning, friction lights a fire. The only problem with friction is when it lasts too long and it erodes and erodes and erodes and erodes the ground or the building or the soul. And so we've got to use friction to our advantage. And if we
Mhm.
pre-hearse, as Joe Dispenza, I think he says that, or that's my made-up word, but if we rehearse the life we want, we imagine, we visualize the life we want, and we start to get aware of what gets in our own way, then when real life happens, we could get back on the horse or pivot back to where we wanna be quickly.
Yeah.
And what response agility is about is being able to take a licking and keep on ticking. And I think I was telling you a story one time, recently, I was, getting ready to go to a trip to Mont Blanc. It was Tour de Blanc, and it's 86 or 7 miles all around Mont Blanc. Italy, Switzerland, France, but actually it's France, Italy, Switzerland, I think.
Mhm.
And 2 weeks before, I got in a bike accident, and I my bike hit a divot. The bike slid out. I hit like a reflector sign with my head. Thank God I had big sunglasses on and a helmet.
Uh-huh.
I catapulted off the sign, turned upside down, and fell 15 feet into a ravine.
My
Still
gosh.
clipped in, still clipped in.
My word.
As I was going into the sign, I did not panic. I said, "Oh, this isn't gonna be good." And it was so fast, but the next thing I remember, I'm rolling and I hear and I feel body going over 3 times. I laid there in the grass for a split second and heard, "Are you okay?" All these people. And my as I'm trying to get myself up, my initial response was, "Why are all these people yelling at me?" And I felt anger. And I said to myself, "Do you really wanna be angry when people are trying to help you?" And I said, "Well, of course not. Like, all this is happening in a split second. I wanna
Yes.
be grateful because I just fell and I'm alive." And I would have never been able to, A, notice my body in anger, feeling the anger running through my body, feeling the angry thoughts, and then catch them in a split second and be grateful. Then it happened again. I finally got to the top of the 15-foot ravine because my friend Mary ran down and got me and was, like, ordering people around to help. Anyway, I'm up atop and I'm aware and awake and present, and I said, they're talking to me and, "How many kids do you have?" And I said, "Am I alive? Maybe I'm dead." And then they all laughed and said, "Well, we'd be dead too." And, and so I had humor because I wasn't in that anger space. But then when I got in the ambulance, they started cutting my clothes off me, putting a neck brace on me, and checking to see if I was paralyzed. And for a split second, I went into deep fear. I felt my body tense up, and then I did my breathing. Am here now in this. Inhale for every word. And I learned that through Michael Brown of the presence process. And I did the presence process for 10 weeks. One time I did it for 10 weeks, one time I did it for 8 weeks. By the time I was in that ambulance and I felt myself go into dread, I did the I am here now in this. And before I knew it, I'm seeing all the cars fly by in the ambulance, and I'm thinking about my kids and my grandkids, and I'm weeping of joy. And it didn't matter anymore what they were doing to me and how many things. When I got to the trauma center, the doctor said, "I don't know what you've done, but you are damn lucky. You have only a few skin things, you've got a few hematomas." And I'm like, "Can I have some fentanyl, please?" Because I was really sore. But she said, "Whatever you're doing physically, And emotionally, it's working, and all I could think of is skull. I do this process all the time. I meditate every day. I have a morning ritual that I learned way back in the Jack Canfield days, and I've still been doing the morning ritual for 20 years. There was one more thing I wanted to share about that is I got home, and the next day I Googled, "Why was I angry after my bike accident?" And now I should have known this, but what ChatGPT told me, 'cause it said, "Do you wanna use chat?" I said, "Yeah." When we get injured, when we're in an accident, the body releases strong doses of cortisol and adrenaline. This is the anger hormones. They're
Yeah.
meant to encapsulate, to inflame, to put inflammation around your internal organs so you can be safe. But if a person doesn't know that they're having a physiological response, they just think they're angry. And here's the thing, the amygdala does that all the time, even if we're just at work having an argument with our coworker. It doesn't have to be. And so when I was flying and I did go to Mont Blanc and I did the hike 2.5 weeks later, I was asking myself, why do you think this happened and you weren't injured? Maybe this is your real life example in 2025 of what doing the work prepares you for in advance.
Yeah.
And then I'll say one more thing. I'm currently in a hospice leadership training so that I can volunteer in hospice. I've been looking for a while. I used to volunteer at transformational programs, and I wanted to do something where nobody was getting anything out of it except spiritually. And so I
Mhm.
found hospice, and boy, oh, are they preparing us to go in, pre-rehearsing, to go in and be with death, have emotion, but not having the emotion have us, because we have to be an even space. We have to
Mhm.
be a clear space. We have to be a present space for whatever this person going through the dying process and their family is experiencing. And I thought, again, this is more responsibility. This is like what I think I'm giving my life to. So anyway, I know I'm like going on and on and on.
No, that's I love that. That made me think of your whole bike story. I have my own bike story. I broke my collarbone on the first triathlon I ever trained for, and I remember hitting a block of wood, going off the road, and then flipping about 25 miles an hour downhill, hit the ground. I mean, I didn't know I had broke my collarbone at the time, but I was still clipped into the bike, slid a bunch. I remember having the thought, "I'm so glad I have a helmet on for quick," and then bam, 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 bam. My head hit again, again, again. And then to your point, I mean, this is training. This is work. This is I'm gonna call it attitude or how you view the world shows up in those stressful moments. Because I actually don't recall ever having an anger reaction. My first reaction, and I'm not joking, the first reaction I had is after I said ow, because I saw my collarbone, the bone sticking through my skin, and I was like, ow. I thought, what are three great things about this? It's like a mini version of Sculpt, right? All the process that you went through, but I was like
Yeah.
I mean, I said, "Well, I don't have to do the run portion." I never really liked the run portion anyways. And then my second thought immediately was, I get to do this again because I always love doing what I finish. I came back the next year and I finished. And then the last one, I said, this is going to be a great story. Those three things. Because if you can find one good thing, you can find two. If you can find two, you can find
Yeah.
three. If you can
Yeah.
find three good
Yeah.
things, you can find anything that's good about a negative, potentially negative situation. So
Yeah.
that whole story just really makes me think about you have trained your brain, you have trained your mind in the most stressful situations to apply responsibility.
Yes.
Um,
And we do that with people in companies,
yes,
and
there you
we
go.
do it through these retreats and the coaching, and like we took a whole group of people to Austin, Texas last week, and we put them through drills. I mean, they're up at it's like boot camp for the soul. They're up at 10 o'clock at night, and we gave them a simulation like you're on a boat and it's sinking and there's only room for 4 of you on the lifeboat. How do you pick who gets on? And everybody was like, some people freaked out, some people didn't wanna do it, but in the end, they all saw the next day that it's just another trigger. This simulation, it's just another trigger. Then we put them on the high ropes course, and they had to go through the whole high ropes course, and then they chose to do it again in record speed because they pre-rehearsed. but it wasn't just the physicality of the high ropes, it was the mental agility of what do I need to do to get through this next challenge.
Mhm. Yes. This is great. So another way I look at this, it sounds like you're doing something similar, is like whenever I set a goal, one of the things I like to do is I like to think of the worst case scenario. What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, I could die or I could do this. And then what would that feel like? How would I handle it? So I'm trying to, I mean, when I was selling books door to door, I learned this when I was a college kid. We went through a 56-point checklist. This seems relevant to what you're talking about, I promise. But or to me, it seems relevant. But this whole prepping, like you're just basically these exercises, you're prepping them for how to handle the situations in the future.
Volatility, uncertainty, chaos, complexity, confusion, ambiguity, or real situation. Also, in that retreat, it was a leadership retreat. Somebody's employee who was on leave lost her 18-year-old son to cancer. And so there was this shock moment, and we were right in the middle of the module on self regulation. So we can't cancel the retreat, everybody go home. They chose to stay. And what I did is I took them through a generative listening process so they could be with each other in the grief. But yes, we're priming the pump, greasing the wheel, practicing, rehearsing for a life that is quite uncertain and a workplace that is quite uncertain. And things are always going to happen. And how will we respond to them?
That's wonderful. Well, I had this whole list of questions and we didn't even need to really go through any of them. Tell us a little bit about what you have coming next. I know that you have a couple retreats. One is the Ignite Power, correct? And then there's another one, Elevate Leadership
Elevate
Retreat?
leadership. So
Okay.
we've got in the coursework of all the work I've done, a lot of the companies that we have worked with have been male dominated. And they, in service of their ERG and their women initiatives, they've asked us to run some women's programs. And they were so successful, it led to us doing an annual event called Ignite Power. And it's this January 14th, 15th, and 16th. We do it every year. And that's happening. It's for women only. It's in Pismo Beach, and we will also be doing it remote. And we've got a great price point on there. And it also, if anybody that's watching is in human resources, you get recertification credits for doing it. So it's also been vetted by one of the most stringent educational bodies there is. Then we also have Elevate Leadership, which is for people who want to take their leadership to the next level. This is for people that this is not their first rodeo of leadership development. They've already done some cultivation of their purpose. They've already looked at some of the ways that they can self regulate. And this is really getting to the point where you're leading a team to execute on your vision. And that is going to be in Carmel Valley in March. And you could just put the links in this podcast.
I know you got the retreats, but don't you have like a book that you're working on or
Yes.
is that
So there is a sequel to this book, Ignite Culture, and it's called Align Culture. And it's about hiring and onboarding and coaching and mentoring and training. It's it's the particles of what do you need to do to have an emergent culture. It's that architecture piece. And I took a lot of the content from the world that I was living in recruiting, including the whole hiring process. And then I added some things on the generations and what it's like to have a remote work environment today and what's in people's way and what people need. Because it's not just saying we have an emergent culture or we're innovative or we believe that we can save the world. It's what are the day to day interactions? How do we set people up to win? How do we treat each other and how do we literally move friction to flow? And that's what is in aligned culture. It'll look a lot like this, but
uh-huh.
it'll have a different name. And then what else is next for me is we have a whole body, over 40 courses that are online, and we have launched a train the trainer program. So there's people who want to do what I do inside companies, and that's called our Culture Catalyst program. And then we are putting all of our online courses available for people so they can do the do it yourselfer version.
That's awesome. You are you are you are I was a driver personality, but you were really a go-getter. Have you heard the book called Go Getter? Oh my goodness. Well, it's a great book. It's one of the first books I ever read. But I really appreciate you taking the time to share with me and share with all who will listen to this. I can't wait to get the snippets because this is going to be just some snippet gold from you. Yeah. And so it sounds like you kind of gave a whole handful of ways that people could reach out to you if they've got questions or if they want to connect, but maybe just elaborate. What's one or two ways that they can connect directly with you or your
LinkedIn,
team?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and then also margaretgraziano.com. Just come right there and send me a message. If you read the book and you reach out for a free consult, if you read the book, I will honor that free consult. If you haven't, it's hard to give a free consult when we don't know what we're talking about and you
Yes,
don't know
that's
my
right.
work. But I'm very responsive. So thank you, David, for having me on. It's always a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing all the beautiful content you're creating
Thank
and
you.
following it.
Yes, I can't wait. Make sure we stay in touch for sure. But this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time again. And to all of you out there, I hope you learned a lot. Hope you picked up one or two new ideas or things that can help you move yourself from friction to flow, as Margaret says. And with that, may you all ace your life. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.